I also had a question for Mr. Cordero, the port director for Long Beach, which moves, I want to say, or rather, allows for about 40% of those containers to come into our country. He's not here, so I guess I'd rather make a little bit of a statement on that because I can't ask him a question. It would simply be an advice that those shippers overseas, given the difficulty that it can be to manifest ships once they've left their point of origin with CBP and other agencies, that they highly consider moving some of those vessels towards Florida. Florida, as of today, has capacity for about 4 million containers right now. Can move ships that contain up to 14,000 TEUs. And I want to say, I believe it's real-time information that the Port of Long Beach has a backlog of about 111 container ships as of today. So I would make that recommendation for those looking to depart Asia to consider moving to the ports of Florida, Miami, Port Everglades, Tampa, Jacksonville, Palm Beach, the ports there. You consider that a shameless plug, don't you? My colleague next to me is laughing about this. I think it is important to consider that when you look at that backlog of what's going on there. But because Mr. Cordero isn't here, I'll just touch on a couple of other things because they're likely coming to a head this Friday with what's known or what's labeled as Build Back Better. And I would ask a couple open-ended questions to the remainder of our panelists. Do any of our panelists see 80,000 IRS workers as a part of improving or fixing our broken supply chain? Or maybe I could ask it another way. Do any of you panelists believe that those 80,000 additional IRS workers are going to be there to help expedite refunds to individuals and businesses and others, or are they there to help collect?
Congressman, I can't speak to to what the IRS employees will be doing, but I do know that there's $5 billion in there directly that will be spent on addressing the supply chain issue, and that is not going to be going through the IRS. That's going to be going through appropriate port funding channels.
Thank you for speaking up, Mr. Reagan. Of that $5 billion, would you say that the $200 million going to Speaker Pelosi's Presidio Park would be part of that $5 billion that you're adding up, or is that something different?
I'm restricting my comments to the money that will address the supply chain, which is, again, the subject of this hearing.
So it'd be fair to say those $200 million in that program would not be addressing the supply chain. That would be a fair thing to say. Mr. Reagan, in your opinion?
I'm not going to comment on any of the other aspects of the bill. I will say that there's $5 billion in there to address supply chain problems at our ports.
Does $200 million for the park, does that help the supply chain?
Again, I'm not going to comment on the $200 million on the park.
This is the kind of stuff that pisses people off around the United States of America. They know perfectly well that $200 million to Pelosi's Park doesn't do a thing to help Build Back Better or help America's supply chain or Thanksgiving or Christmas or any business or corporation or anybody that wants to get a good or anything else from A to B. And you're sitting here pretending as though you don't have an answer to it. You really just don't want to answer the question. People are not ignorant to that fact.
Sir, with all due respect, that is a large bill, and we support the bill. There's also really significant money for transit in that bill and transit training operations, which we support. As you know, there are a lot of priorities, including in environmental issues. There's a lot of issues in there for different aspects of our economy that, frankly, many of the people in the majority believe we need to address. So all of those are not going to address supply chain. Your question was about whether that specific one would address supply chain. No, and neither would the transit fund money. But right now, the subject of this hearing is supply chain. And there is $5 billion that will go through the Department of Commerce specifically to address a supply chain crisis.
I appreciate you addressing my question directly. Took a couple minutes, but I appreciate you doing it nonetheless. In that, I will note this. I did not hear in anybody's testimony. I only have a few seconds remaining. I did not note in anybody's testimony anybody quoting Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg saying that the reason that we have these supply chain issues is because the president has successfully guided the economy out of the teeth of a terrifying recession. I didn't hear that in anybody's testimony. And in that, my time has expired, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman.